Welcome, folks, to the 2014 Chicago Custom and Vintage Drum Show. Jim Messina here with Vintage Drums Talk, and we're coming to you from a special venue right here at the show. It's the Rebeats Cafe. This is the first time we're doing this, and I'm proud to start the whole show off with Jason Batchko. How you doing, Jason?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to see you. We've talked on the phone, and we did a little presentation earlier for Vintage Drums Talk, and now we're here to present a very special drum that you found right here in Chicago. This is an amazing story, folks. A lot of history that goes along with this particular drum. It's not always the case when we can trace the history behind drums, but in this particular case, it's all there. It catches my eye, and just as a drummer, now I might add, folks, you're not necessarily a vintage drum collector, right?
I was going to add that. So, should I hold that?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I have vintage drums, but I use them to play, and I wasn't that well versed in what this drum was exactly. So I was checking it out, and I noticed that it was actually in pretty good condition for its age.
Yes.
And then I saw that it was made by Conn, and I didn't know too much about the history of Conn. You know, I'm more familiar with Ludwig and Gretsch and whatnot. So I saw it was made by Conn. I saw all these cool engravings on it, but then I also saw another engraving that said Frank Biggs, 1923.
Frank Biggs, 1923. Now that's very intriguing, because a lot of times certain drums, you'll have endorser drums that will have a plaque on them or a badge, but to have this engraved like that,
right.
I'll bet that got your curiosity up. Even though you're not a collector, Frank Biggs had to have something to do with this drum. So what did you find out about Frank Biggs?
So I went home, I Googled Frank Biggs, and I found the first thing that came up was that he was the songwriter for a song called That's When I'll Come Back to You, recorded by Louis Armstrong in the Hot Seven. So that right there, for me anyway, for the jazz history buff in me, was pretty exciting.
That alone,
yeah.
You know, usually we don't find things like that connected with drums. When you get provenance like that, just the fact Frank Biggs and his connection with this song, that happened to be recorded by Louis Armstrong.
Yeah. It's all documented, and it's all there, for sure. Yeah, there's the picture of the record. So this whole story basically takes two different routes. It's got the drum itself, and then the whole Frank Biggs history, which even as of last night, I found out new stuff about him.
Well, from what you told me in the past, I understand Frank Biggs, did you say he was already a prominent drummer in Chicago in the 20s?
Yeah, so the more I was digging, the first thing we found was an actual Conn instrument ad from 1922 with Frank Biggs's picture in it. He was playing with the Clarence Jones Wonder Orchestra.
Yes, I see we have that up now.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so that was the first thing I found. So now we've got a photo of him, and that was amazing that we could find that.
Now, this is Frank Biggs actually.
Now, that's actually,
There it is.
There
Frank
it is.
Biggs. Now, we've determined, we were thinking in the beginning, hey, maybe that's this particular drum in the photo, but the more I look at it, I can see clearly that is not this drum. But
exactly, yeah. This photo was taken a year earlier. This drum's engraved 1923, and that photo's from 22, like right before.
But to be able to trace it like that, that's something. To be able to see the actual guy that owned this drum. Now, there's even more to the story, right? You've even dug deeper and found out more about Frank Biggs and
more and more. Yeah, well, he played with the Clarence Jones Wonder Orchestra, which Clarence Jones was a very prominent ragtime and jazz piano player in Chicago, sort of another forgotten musician, but at the time he was very important and popular. So they were playing at all of the big clubs on the South Side, including the Moulin Rouge Cafe.
And we have that ad right here. It actually says Clarence M. Jones and his Wonder Orchestra at the Moulin Rouge Cafe.
Exactly.
We don't always get that kind of clarification, which is making this drum even all that more intriguing.
Right. And then after that, I found on a compilation record a recording by the Clarence Jones Wonder Orchestra called The Arm Breaker, and that it was credited to the same band that played at the Moulin Rouge Cafe. So then I've got, we have Biggs documented playing on recording.
I see.
But then later, this whole Biggs search has been going on like for a couple of months. I just keep finding new things out.
Well, since you called me, you even have new information as far as his association with the union, the musicians union back in Chicago in those days.
Yeah.
The unions were a bit different, weren't they?
They were different. Yeah, there was you had the black union and the white union, and his brother Verona Biggs was the black union president.
I see.
Yeah. So he was, and I've got actually just a side note. I put together a folder of all these newspaper clippings from the 20s, basically, from the Chicago Defender, that has a lot about Frank Biggs and the places he played, and some pictures of the records he was on.
Now, you're going to leave that here at the show?
Yeah, so anyone that would like to look at it, for sure.
Terrific.
That's why I put it together. So it's got a bunch of stuff in there. But yeah, there's just some little articles about Frank Biggs substituting for his brother when his brother was out of town on business. And Frank would take over at the union, and so there's that story. But as I kept digging, I found, I was wondering if there'd be any more recordings of him. And sure enough, I found more. So he's, with Clarence Jones, he's credited on 3 different sides on the Paramount record label.
I see.
Which is that record label in itself has been in the news a lot lately. This big compilation that Jack White put out of all these old Paramount artists just came out. So it's this kind of another interesting side note to the whole thing.
If we take a look at the drum itself, from what I understand, this is a Victor model.
Correct.
And what size is this?
This is, I believe, a 5.5 by 14 with 8 lugs.
Now, you've been talking to some people and getting some opinions about the history of this drum and what could have happened with this strainer.
Okay.
Now, we'll show the folks the strainer right here. There we've got a couple of extra holes, and who knows what could have happened with that, but what are some of the opinions you've got from people that you've called around the world?
Yeah, basically, that's exactly what I did. Originally I wanted to restore the drum, and I was trying to get some different opinions, so I just went online to look up, different names and experts, and the first one I came across was Adrian Kirschler, and then I found out he's a pretty important guy in the
Adrian Kirschler
in the drum field.
He's considered a wonder boy, basically, as far as restorations.
Yeah.
You can go to see his website, AK Drums. You'll be amazed. But he weighed in on this, and what did he have to say?
Well, the first thing was, at least through email, he seemed very excited about the drum. He was like, "This is incredible! It's a gem you found."
Yes.
So then we got more into. He gave me some ideas about if I wanted to restore it, but then he also got me in touch with Harry Kangany.
Now there's another name that everybody knows. What did Harry have to say? I imagine he was surprised to see that this came into your possession.
Yeah, he was surprised as well. And they both just gave me a lot of information about what the drum is, and that it was, a gold-plated drum, and the history, more of the history about Conn.
Well, I'll tell you, from what I see, the engraving pattern on this is unusual. I've seen a few examples of gold-plated Conn drums from this era. Mike Corrado is one that owns, I think, 1 or 2. I mean, a couple of years ago, he came up with one right here at the show, and we're going to be talking to him a little bit later about that.
And I talked to him, too. I emailed him, and he gave me a bunch of great information, too. So I got all the great guys to give me some info.
You're talking to the most knowledgeable people pretty much in the vintage drum community that are going to be interested in this kind of drum. And I must say that to just make a thrift store purchase like this and to bring this into the vintage drum community is really a thrill for myself, and I'm sure it's a thrill for our viewers.
Right. You were talking about the strainer, too.
Yes, the strainer. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and one other interesting thing. On the inside calfskin head, Frank Biggs's signature is on there. It's still legible, and there's his inked signature. And we were trying to figure out... It's possible, because it's upside down, that he might have had it on the top head at some point, and the light that's inside the drum to heat the heads up. The idea I thought would maybe be that it would shine his name up so that at least he could see it, or whoever could maybe.
Now I'm looking at this
it.
right now, folks, and you're right. It is difficult to see.
Yeah.
But now, and I told you this in our earlier interview, that now that I'm seeing the thickness of this head, this is not usually what they would put on the bottom of a head. Usually it's what they call a slunk head,
right,
which is thinner. Just like today, we have batter heads and we have a thinner head on the bottom.
Exactly.
Same here. My guess is this was at one time a batter head, just because you could see the wear, the stick
that's
marks.
What and
that's
he
what
probably,
I thought. In those days,
he probably switched it.
Yeah.
Because it got too beaten up, so he just switched it around, and so he's got the bottom head on the top, and vice versa. But I mean, I think he probably was. Frank Biggs was probably the last guy to use this drum, just from the way it looked. So. This thing probably hasn't been played in who knows.
This is untouched.
75 years.
You still have the light fixture inside.
Yeah.
Can't really see it in this shot, folks, but take a look at the picture, and that's what they used to use to control the the humidity and the tension on these drums, because calf skin heads in those days were a nightmare. Right. I'll tell you, it's not like today. Right. You had in humid weather, they would get wet, they would get moisture filled, and they would start to sag. So that's why they would have a light bulb inside. Hence, we've got the light fixture right here, and there's the outlet for it. So everything looks to be original, except the question about the strainer. But truly a remarkable drum.
Right.
It still has the original dust, folks.
Oh yeah,
I like to see that.
It's a mess inside.
Yes, that's great that you've left it alone.
Yeah, I haven't touched it since
you kept your wits about you,
yeah.
and you didn't go polishing this drum.
Right.
But I must say the engraving is exquisite. It's very clear. It's very deep engraving, and I've seen another drum like that.
Right.
And we're going to talk about that a little later and make a comparison.
Great.
I believe Mike Corrado has something very similar to this to show us today.
Fantastic.
And it has a similar engraving pattern, and it's great.
Yeah.
But I must say, for not being a collector, you have brought something very interesting into the vintage drum community, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I want you to show this around the show today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Folks, we've been sitting here with Jason Batchko. Jim MESSINA is my name, representing Vintage Drums Talk right here at the Rebeats Cafe at the Chicago 2014 Vintage and Custom Drum Show. Stick around. We've got a lot more for you. You're going to be surprised. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks a lot. Nice to meet you.